Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I am bringing you adult sci-fi and fantasy recommendations for YA readers. So this is a topic that has come up quite a lot in the past couple of weeks, and it seems to be one of those that just kind of like circles around on Twitter again and again and again. Someone had said something about like, why weren't there more fantasy books without teenagers because they don't want to read YA forever? And then people were saying, well, adult fantasy exists. And then people kept responding, well, it's depressing, full of sex, or written by old white men. None of which is completely true. Sure, you get those three things, but there's so much adult fantasy out there, just like there's so much YA out there that everyone can find something that they'd like. So instead of getting mad about it, although I got a little bit mad about it, I decided to pull together a list of 12 series or standalone books that I think would be really great for YA readers. They either hit the same beats of YA stories, they contain themes that YA readers tend to care about, or they just have that kind of crossover appeal. So they're mostly fantasy. They are mostly written by women, but there are some sci-fi books in here, there are some novellas, there are some standalones, there are some series, there's one book written by a dude, so there's a lot of stuff here, and I'm hoping that you guys can find something that you might like. So first up is the David Trilogy. This is by S.A. Chakraborty. This starts with the City of Brass and goes on to the Kingdom of Copper, and we are getting Empire of Gold, the final book in the trilogy, in June. So this is going to be complete very, very soon. This is a fantasy series that is set in, I believe, 18th century Cairo, and we follow a girl named Nari, and she wants to be a healer, and she's kind of a strange person. She has been orphaned and she has this incredible affinity for languages. Sorry, there's a cat in my lap. And she's kind of always been a bit of a kind of strange person. She can sense sickness in people. She performs these kind of rituals for people, all of that. So basically one day she gets a little bit in too deep with a ritual that she believes is fake, but actually is a very real thing. She summons a djinn and she gets whisked away to the city of Daevabad. And the politics in this book are amazing. The characters are wonderful. There is a wonderful romance. There's a bit of a love triangle, which is fantastically done. I'm not someone who enjoys love triangles. Or maybe it's a love triangle in my head. I don't really know. I know who I'm rooting for. And it's a beautiful and heartbreaking series. It's just wonderful. You've probably heard of these books before. If not, then you probably aren't paying much attention to adult booktube, but these are hugely popular for a very, very good reason. They're some of my favorite books ever. Next up is The Wolf of Yarrow by K.S. Veloso. This one I actually have a full review for on my channel, so I'm not going to go too in-depth into it here. You can go ahead and check that out if you're interested in learning more. But basically we follow a woman named Talia who is queen on a very shaky throne. She's known as the bitch queen. She's not necessarily beloved by her people. Her estranged husband left her and her son 5 years ago, and she receives a letter from him sort of wanting to kind of basically get back together and talk things out. So she goes off to this foreign land and everything kind of falls apart. She finds herself completely alone for the first time in her life, and she is fighting off assassination attempts. This is great. This is basically like if the YA novel ends, you get your full YA story, and the YA novel ends in this still kind of in this dark world. This is where it kind of picks up, where that YA heroine is a fully realized adult hero, and it's so good. It's so fun. I absolutely adored this. I loved the main character. She is flawed. She is far from perfect, but she is so badass, and I absolutely adore her. This would be an amazing read for anyone who's looking for adult fantasy. Next up is one that I am sure you all know of. It's probably a little bit daunting because it is quite long, but it reads so quickly, and it's a perfect crossover book for YA fantasy readers. This is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is another one that I have a full review for on my channel, and it's a book that got a lot of attention, but it's one that scares people a little bit, and I'm here to tell you, do not be daunted by this. It is a long book, but it absolutely flies by. The world building is incredible. The female characters are amazing. There's dragons, there's lesbian relationships, there's betrayal and backstabbing and magic, and it's just incredible. Absolutely amazing. Again, there is a full review of this book on this channel, but I really think that of all of these, this is probably going to be the easiest place for a lot of people to start if they have been reading YA and they've been reading kind of the high fantasy type of YA. Again, don't be daunted. It flies by really quick. I would not recommend the audiobook, but I would recommend picking up the ebook or the physical copy. This is now out in paperback and it's a little bit smaller. Next up is The Green Bone Saga by Fonda Lee. So we have Jade City and Jade War, and these books are so good. I believe the last one is coming out this year, and I'm so excited. This is the kind of series that will make you fall— hi Dex. This is the kind of series that will make you fall in love with every character and then will rip your fucking heart out of your chest. It is incredibly readable. It is fantastic. The women in this book are just astonishing, but the male characters are just as good. The characterization in this is wonderful. The world building is incredible because it's set in a kind of 1930s to 1950s inspired, sort of like a fantasy version of Hong Kong, this island nation in which jade is the sort of greatest commodity because some of these people have an affinity for jade, and it basically boosts their strength and their speed, and they become greenbone warriors. And it's all about kind of— some people say it's a lot like The Godfather in a lot of ways, and it kind of is, but I feel like it goes a lot deeper than that. It's all about family, and it's all about, you know, family honor and, you know, sticking up for your people, and it's just like, oh, it's so good, and it will absolutely destroy you. Fonda Lee is an incredible writer, and again, these are a little bit on the longer side, but you will fly through them. I will recommend the audiobook for these because the narrator is fantastic. That's how I consumed them, and I scared my husband a couple of times by literally gasping out loud while I was listening to the audiobooks for these. So if you are looking for some really good, diverse, fantasy that's maybe a little bit unusual, it's not high fantasy, it feels very realistic, it feels almost like historical fiction, and you're looking for really strong characterization, you want these. The next series that I am going to recommend is one that I haven't actually finished yet. I am recommending this on the merit of the first book, which is great, and I really think would appeal to YA readers. This is the Binti Trilogy by Nnedi Okorafor. This is science fiction, and they are a series of 3 novellas about a girl who is the first of her people to go off to university, this university that's off-planet. And while she is on the ship taking her across to this amazing new place, the ship is attacked by an alien species, and she is the only person who can kind of communicate and figure out how to survive long enough to get to the university and get help. And it's so wonderful. It's so incredibly good. She's a wonderful writer, and this character of Binti, who is in the situation of going off to university, getting into this new situation, but also going off to school, and the school narrative is of course a very popular one in YA. I think that you guys would absolutely love this, especially as a kind of beginning place for science fiction. If you're a fantasy reader, if you're a young adult reader and you want to transition into adult sci-fi, or just into sci-fi in general, this is a great choice. Next is Seanan McGuire's Wayward Children series. So we've got 5 novellas at the moment. The 6th one is due out in January, and these are like a treasure trove of undiscovered books for people who don't read adult fantasy. If you only read YA fantasy and you haven't read these, you are truly missing out. So first up is Every Heart a Doorway, probably my favorite book in the series, tied with another one. Then we have Down Among the Sticks and Bones. We have Beneath the Sugar Sky, In an Absent Dream, which is also tied for first and was one of my favorite books of last year. And we have Come Tumbling Down, which is the last one. So basically, I think you can read these really in any order you like, although I always recommend publication order, so long as you start with Every Heart a Doorway, because everything really branches off from this particular book. Essentially, we have children who go through portals into fantastical lands, much like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. However, at some point they are forced to return to the real world against their will, and Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children is basically the place that they go to try to recover from the fact that they are not going back to the place that they truly loved, a place where they really felt like they belonged. So this particular book follows a character named Nancy, and she's wonderful. I absolutely love her. And another thing that I really enjoy about this book is that it is a very, very dark murder mystery. There is a murder that happens in this book, and they're trying to figure out what is going on. And it's just brilliant. All of these books have this incredible quality to them. Shauna McGuire, as I talked about in my middle game review, which I don't think is necessarily YA appropriate, she has this incredible way of writing childhood. She has this incredible sense of sort of like the best days of your life, but also incredible loss, sort of the loss of innocence and all of that. And they're just beautifully, beautifully written. And all of these books follow kind of different characters as they are experiencing different points in their lives. And after they have been forced to leave this wonderful place that fits them perfectly, and they have to deal with the fact that they're in the real world. So there's a very, very tragic sense to a lot of these books, but there's also friendship, there is acceptance, there are loads of queer characters in these books, and they're just wonderful. So if you haven't picked these up, the hardcovers, it's just an absolute like scam on the part of the publisher. They're really expensive, but if you are able to pick them up from the library maybe, or you do want to splurge on the hardcovers or maybe borrow them, get the ebooks, I would highly recommend them. They're just absolutely wonderful. Next up is a series of books that everyone was raving about a few years ago. The trilogy has since completed, so you don't hear about it as much anymore, but these books are absolutely incredible, and I think that a lot of times they get misclassified as YA for many reasons, including the fact that the author is a woman. But I think that these have a lot of crossover appeal because the main character starts out quite young. She's a child in the first book, and she grows and grows and grows, and it's a just absolutely fierce depiction of one woman sort of fighting against the society that she is in and living her best life and being true to herself. This is the Winter Night Trilogy by Catherine Arden. So we have The Bear and the Nightingale, then The Girl in the Tower, and finally, as I drop everything, The Winter of the Witch. So basically these books follow a character named Vazia, and she is a girl living in the kind of rural countryside in medieval Russia, and she has this sort of ability to see and communicate with the creatures of folklore, Russian folklore. And this of course gets her dubbed a witch. She is sort of ostracized, and there's this horrible Catholic priest he's obsessed with this idea of her being a witch. And throughout the series, she goes from a young child through into her teenage years, and then I believe into her early 20s, and she's always true to herself and who she is. She's very comfortable with herself. It's everyone else who's not comfortable with who she is. And she remains so strong and so sort of stubborn and willful, but she is such a fantastic character. She's really brilliant. The first book deals a lot with sort of magic. The second book feels a lot like historical fiction, is a little bit less on the magical side, and the final book, which is a brilliant end to the series, sort of mixes the two a little bit more. I cannot recommend these more highly. You've probably heard about them a lot if you have been on BookTube for a couple of years, but they're really phenomenal. They're absolutely worth your time. They're beautifully atmospheric, so they are perfect for the winter time. Next up we have Madame Becky Chambers. This is the other sci-fi series that is on this list with very good reason. I think that, again, this has a ton of crossover appeal for YA readers because of the lot of themes that she explores. So we have The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, A Closed and Common Orbit, and then we have Record of a Spaceborne Few. I don't know if the series is done or not. I don't know if she's going to keep writing them or not, but she's taking a bit of a break. So fingers crossed that she does, but she is also putting out more sci-fi in the meantime. I just think that these in particular are very, very YA friendly. Namely, talking about the first one. I think if you like the first one, you'll love the rest of them. So this first one features a squad, a spaceship crew of a tunneling ship. Basically, the long journey goes from sort of civilization all the way out a year's travel to a particular destination, and they are a wormhole tunneling ship, so they're basically going to punch a wormhole and instantly travel back. So this whole book follows that crew, and it's kind of almost like vignettes or short stories about how that crew copes on the way. They learn a lot about each other. Not everyone likes each other so much. There's some romance, there's some sort of queer romance, and it's just a wonderful, really, truly wonderful book. The thing that makes Becky Chambers so incredible, if you haven't heard me yell about her enough already on this channel, is that I think that her books are very peaceful. And there's like stuff that happens, there's action in this book, but in a lot of ways it's very peaceful. It's about people being people and learning about each other, learning to live with each other, and sort of, you know, recovering from their past, looking towards their futures. They're just so good. They're so wonderful. And I really, really think that if you're someone who's looking to get into adult sci-fi and fantasy, again, this is a great place to start, really and truly. I'm sure everyone has already read these because there's hugely popular books, but if you haven't, I really, really think that you should. And last but not least, I did say that there was a man on this list. We have Brandon Sanderson. So this is Warbreaker, and I think that the Mistborn series would obviously do really, really well with YA audiences. It is, I think, written to be adult fantasy, but it has so many of those YA beats to it. This one, however, is a little bit more underrated, so if you have read Mistborn and you enjoyed that, if you read some other kind of that kind of epic high fantasy and you want more, Warbreaker is a great place to start. And I think that this one is really underrated because it's his princess book. I had no idea that Brandon Sanderson had written a princess book, which is amazing. So basically, this is a standalone book at the moment, although we may be getting another one in the future. We follow two sisters, Ciri and Vivenna. So Vivenna has been sort of destined from birth to marry this kind of terrifying figure called the God King as part of a treaty between their lands to kind of ensure peace. However, their father, who is the worst father ever, decides that he loves Vivenna too much and doesn't want to essentially send her to her death, and sends Ciri, his younger, more annoying daughter. She is very headstrong, she doesn't fit in with sort of like their people and their culture or anything. So we have Ciri, who is kind of been thrown into this terrifying situation of marrying not only a man she doesn't know, but a man who has so much kind of ritual and rules around him that if she breaks, she could just get killed. Then we have Vivenna, who is, had basically her entire life taken away from her. She has been preparing to marry this man and become queen her entire life, and that has been stolen from her. So this is a great book. It has a great magic system, of course, because it's Brandon Sanderson. It is super, super pacey. It is a really enjoyable read, and the audiobook is very, very good for this one, which is how I consumed it. So I would definitely recommend this one for YA readers. It has that really strong focus on female characters, although I would say Ciri is definitely like your standard sort of template Brandon Sanderson type character, which is great, but she feels a lot like everyone else in his books. It's Vivenna that I really truly love, and she's a little bit older as well. So I would definitely recommend this. I think it's so much fun. It's a great read. It's a little bit long. A lot of these books are a little bit long. However, I really think you'll fly through it. So that is it for my list of adult sci-fi and fantasy books that I think would really appeal to YA readers. I always encourage people to get outside of their comfort zone with reading because you never know what you're going to love. You never know if it's going to maybe break a reading slump. You never know if you're going to discover a new favorite character or genre or, you know, author or whatever. However, it can be incredibly daunting to actually step into a new genre. So hopefully this helps. I really hope that you guys find something that you will enjoy, and I would love to hear if you are an adult fantasy and sci-fi reader, if you have any other recommendations for people who are looking for YA, and if you are a YA reader who's a little bit stuck, let me know. Let's see if we can find you something you'd like. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.